welcome back to boot camp number 1, where we're going to work on your calling, character, and vision frame. My name is Ben Ingebretson. Thanks for circling back. We're going to jump into the deep end of the pool and begin to work on equipping you to develop your new church start. Why is this lesson important? Okay, let's just get this first little paragraph out of the way. The first ministry tool that you have to leverage in your work of starting a new church is your own personal walk with Jesus. That is not only the first, it's the most powerful ministry tool you have. Getting clear around your calling and your sense of vision and your focus on following Christ, your character that way, as well as getting clear on the kinds of off-ramps that you're not going to take in that journey is really a defining and an empowering and a critical part of the process. And we won't go into that in detail, except for that it's clear that Nehemiah had a heartbreak. He had a deep passion for something that needed to be done, and he was willing to name it and state it with clarity. Will Mancini's book, Church Unique, is a great tool, particularly the portions having to do with a vision frame, because he's going to help you think through the pieces, the nuts and bolts of constructing the clarity around where your church plant is headed and what it's going to look like whenever it arrives. Review that timeline and the magnitude of the work. There's a lot that's going to have to be done, but it helps you kind of put in context the importance of getting this first part right. There's a pre-launch task worksheet there that kind of breaks out the various categories that we're going to work on in terms of making contacts and identifying leaders and starting small groups and identifying preview services, as well as that online document, The Case for Planting. This session is going to lay some foundation for you in the fund development work that's going to occur in the next session. We didn't talk so much about the timeline exercise, so let's go there for a minute. What I would like you to do, get 3-4 pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper, attach them all to one another the long way, so you've got a long horizontal document. That becomes a kind of a timeline that you can work with and put up on a wall somewhere in your office, or have in a place where you can unfold for people as they begin to kind of work on this with you, and begin to use sticky notes, post-it notes, to kind of attach where is this going to be accomplished and when is this going to be accomplished. There's probably over 100 or more, a couple of hundred tasks that have to be accomplished to start a new church. And the timeline is a tool that will help you organize those tasks and think about them sequentially. And so with the benefit of that white space and then the post-it notes, you can begin to move things around and adjust things around. That's just a tool that we're going to come back to again and again and again, and we're going to build that timeline out as these training sessions unfold. So you'll have more and more post-it notes to attach to your timeline. Let's talk about calling and character, and then get on to a vision frame. Personal calling, and starting with the big why. it's definitely the place we want to start in church planting, because the temptation is to start with a what and the how. I've left a website address for you. Take a few minutes, go to that website. I'm hoping that YouTube clip spoke powerfully to you. Being able to articulate your why, your personal calling into church planting is so powerful to stay in touch with. In fact, there are 5-6 different dimensions to your calling. First, how is it the gospel has a grip on your life? I mean, how did you meet Jesus? How did Jesus change your life? What's been the transformational power of the gospel in your life? Was your life one in which you felt like you needed some sense of purpose and direction? Were you struggling with some brokenness? Were you overcome by that sense of personal shame, guilt? Has the Christian community become so life-giving to you? Have you experienced recovery, healing? What dimension of the gospel speaks so powerfully to the core of your life that you would say, yes, that is the grip that following Jesus has on me? It's more than going through the motions. This is more than a job, right? This is a deep sense of calling that begins even before my call into church planting, begins with my call to Jesus. Henry Nouwen writes about this. He says, we're all first and foremost called to Jesus, and then we're called into some life work. That's a manifestation of the gifts that God has given to us. How is it that you would articulate the call Jesus extended to you and that you responded to?
So I was not raised going to church. My family and I started going to church when I was 16. Both my parents were reading Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life, made them just think about church and Christianity in a different way. So they started church shopping, and I was 16 and not interested. Until they woke me up one Sunday morning and said, we're going to church and we're joining today, so wear something nice. But it was after my class would have been confirmed, so I never went to confirmation, and I never went to their membership classes. In the background, you're hearing my dogs wrestle. So we joined, and that evening I was invited to a youth group and just fell head over heels in love with church and church community. And my peers, we got together every week and talked about what was actually on our hearts and what we thought God had to say about all of these things. And by the time I was 18, people were saying, I think you should be a pastor. When I was appointed fresh out of seminary to Centennial United Methodist, they were just about to celebrate their 60th anniversary. But it still felt like this was really exciting to be a part of. I thought of myself as a turnaround pastor, as a revitalizer. I will say that has been the most difficult part. If you were just calibrating the amount of work and the amount of emotional work that goes into this, I would say the hardest and most difficult part has actually been the majority of givers had no intention of ever worshiping at this new thing. And I wonder how much from the sending congregation did they feel like we don't have to change. The most challenging thing about this whole process was realizing that the sending congregation are just as much a part of this new initiative as the folks who are actually physically over at the new plant. How we organize ourselves as a church, what we missionally do together, it changed everything to become a multi-site. So many churches that were doing well through the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s are suddenly finding themselves in a position where they're not doing well. They're not attracting a lot of young folks. They're stuck. The church globally does not need churches that maintain. We need churches that grow. Jesus asked us to grow and multiply. Jesus asked us to go and baptize whole nations and spread the gospel. And to start identifying with that call that we are called to grow. If we're not growing, we're dying. What we've understood what a healthy church is 10 years ago is not what we understand a healthy church to be today. If you asked me if I was called to be a church planter, I would say no. And I'm pretty sure I did say no to you, Kathy. But God backed me into it. There was wisdom in all the folks around me, in my DS, in you, Kathy, in God, most certainly, about what am I called to do. And I know that I am not afraid to fail. In the end, I was called to church planting to try to kind of break the mold a little bit for the sake of spreading the gospel.
And then another dimension of your calling is this dimension relative to church planting and your gifts as an entrepreneur and the confirmation of others, the assessment, for instance, that the annual conference did with you, or that others have encouraged you to consider church planting. Maybe it's a heartbreak for a certain population of folks. I was with an individual recently. Their heart just breaks for people who need to be in recovery and discover Jesus in that process of recovery. The fact that your spouse is bought into this with you, the fact that there's a congregation, I hope there's some congregation that's standing behind you in this. Talk with your district superintendent, they may be able to help you in that. There's 5 or 6 areas that can help you articulate your calling. I would like you to stop the recording at this point and draft a statement of personal calling. You may want to touch on any or all of the areas we've just identified. Drafting that in a way that you can share with others will become a foundational piece that you will come back to again and again and again. The first place we minister from is our own authentic walk with Christ, our own authentic commitment to be in mission with Jesus and the gifts that He's given to us. And then the call we have out into mission is the second piece. To share that with other people and have that clear in your mind as to how you'd articulate it is this first step. The second area I want to talk with you about has to do with spiritual and character development. Before you can lead anyone else, you first of all have to lead yourself. How are you doing in your relationship with Christ, and how are you doing at then inviting others to follow you as you follow Him? How's your relationship with God in terms of spiritual practices? Who might you need to become accountable to tune up those practices? Ministering out of that and out of that deep walk with Jesus cannot be minimized. It's so incredible that church planting be, and here's the word, overflow. Overflow out of who you are in your own enthusiasm for the kingdom in a way that's appropriate, right? It's so important that your walk with Jesus be authentic to who you are and that you have a genuine enthusiasm about that comes out in a way that's congruent with your personality. And the only way you can do that is by putting in the time around spiritual practices and your relationship with God. Your relationship with your spouse and your family. You can't get very far in this work if you don't have a good relationship with your spouse. You can't get very far in this work if you don't have a good relationship with your family. And so establishing healthy boundaries, relational priorities so that you'll stay healthy at home in every sense of the word, really, really critical. Your relationship with your planting supervisor, coach, it's just very important. Build trust on all the fronts. If there's conflict, that's not uncommon in ministry. There's differing opinions and people see things from different perspectives. Then you need to be forthright and straight up about that with your coach or your supervisor so that the conflict can be worked through. It's one of the critical tasks in ministry is learning how to not avoid conflict, but to go after it in an appropriate way, healthy way, resolve it and get on. Your coach, your supervisor, yours truly, we've been down this road before. We want to get to the solution side and keep moving forward with you. I've given you a link to a website, Trust Building Exercises from the Covey organization. I want to strongly encourage you to look those over. It's often the case that you and I fail in one or more of those areas of trust building, and that becomes the beginnings of a project meltdown, right? It's that we fail to build trust. Nothing moves much faster than the speed of trust on every level of church planting. And so building trust And using the trust-building exercises that are there are excellent, excellent character-building exercises for you. Get feedback on your personal health. Who will you allow close enough to ask hard questions? Your coach is intended to be that person, but it's good to have more than one person who's close enough to you that can ask the toughest questions. Don't assume that because you're thrust into this work of ministry that you then have to hold all the cards so close to your chest. Being open and transparent with a few people, really good discipline so that you can receive their feedback and stay humble. Staying humble is always a good thing and predictive of health. Drafting a personal growth plan. As you've thought through these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas, where is it that you need to say, hey, you know what? I need to start a regular physical exercise regimen. Hey, you know what? I need to practice dating my spouse at least one night a week. I need to put some things in place that I've not been doing because we're playing for keeps as we jump into this planting work. May I remind us that our adversary, you can't do church planting work without bumping up against really, really hard stuff. And the origins of that hard stuff can come from lots of places, including a very dark place. Being proactive around personal growth is minimal towards prevailing in the tough times. And so what you'll find from Mancini is this 5-dimensional vision frame: mission, values, strategy, measures, and then your vision proper. What are we doing? How are we doing it? When are we going to know we've been successful? And then right there in the center, where is God taking us? The vision frame is kind of like a steering wheel for a church planter. You got to keep your hands on that wheel. The temptation is going to be for people to distract you with other directions for the plant to go. This is so common in church planting when a really, really cool family hooks up with your ministry and they think you ought to do X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, you've been working on A, B, and C. And the temptation is to go their way because that's the way you would keep them in your tent. You're always going to have another cool family coming along, and there's always going to be another individual that's going to say, hey, why don't we go this way? And you're going to be all over the map. If you don't anchor in this mission, value, strategy, measures, vision conversation, you're going to experience time and again the bumpiness, the herky-jerky, and the setback of not having a deep rudder. Getting the vision frame is a big piece of work for this session. It's going to take you some time. You're going to revise it. You're going to draft a vision, edit it over time. This is going to help people see why you're choosing the priority that you choose. It's going to help you stay focused and say no to things. And it's going to help people see, and here's a key, how they can get involved. You're going to paint a picture as a result of this vision frame activity that people will be able to find their place either in or out of your church plant, and over the long haul, you're going to be served well by it. So you see some characteristics of a good vision. It's clear, concise, compelling, catalytic, contextual. Begin to think about those qualities and then think about how you'll cast that vision. Do it in a way that emotionally connects with someone else, that recognizes a problem that needs to be addressed. You're going to deepen this sense of vision over time as you get to know your community better and you're able to paint a picture of a desired outcome. It's going to call out some urgency and it's going to be imaginative and a God-sized vision. So there's some qualitative features here for you to work on as you craft your vision frame. This is going to take you some time, right? So give yourself the benefits of time. Don't skate past this and say, I'll figure it out someday. Before we're moving on past this first lesson, we want you to be able to identify and design that vision statement so that you could share it with 3 different people: a donor, a person on your team, and a pre-Christian. How would you share your vision with someone who is never going to attend, but who might become a donor to help you during the startup phase. Some of you are raising 10% of your startup expenses. So how will you craft your vision statement so that they will hear it? How would you adjust or edit that vision for a person who's on your team? Here's a really important one. How would you state your vision for a person who's not a Christ follower, but they're clearly open and interested? And you're having a conversation with them and they say, well, tell me more. Tell me more about this project that you're working on. I see you here at the coffee shop every day. You're hanging out with people. We've gotten to know one another. What is it that you're doing? Being able to answer and respond to those three types of individuals is a preparatory piece that'll tee you up for lots of other conversations that are likely, very, very likely conversations that are coming just around the corner. Clarifying your key partners. We've touched on this. Your key partners should include, again, your judicatory leader, your denominational connection. I hope, again, that you have a local parent church sponsor. Some of you will identify that person as your fiscal sponsor, the person that's going to be cutting your check, receiving your contributions, keeping track of your finances. And that's a good role for them to be in, but I hope that it goes beyond that. I hope that your relationship with that church is one in which they pray for you and they're in your corner. Another church nearby, they may not be able to get involved in your ministry from the standpoint of giving you a squad of people, but they may also have networks of friends and relationships that they would be willing to share with you and introduce you to people, at the very least for their prayer support, their advocacy. Make sure that you identify some congregation that's going to say, hey, we're in your corner, we're excited about what you're doing, and going to pray and support you in the work that you're doing. Of course, you've got friends and family, and stay grounded with those folks. They're the ones that are going to be around, and then your coach. So these 4 points of partnership are ones that you want to just be able to articulate. We're going to have regular stakeholder meetings every other month together, and it'll be an opportunity for your judicatory leader and your local support person, whether that's your fiscal agent and or your parent church leader, along with your coach, to get together with you and make sure that we're all aligned and aiming in the same direction, right? That we're up to date on your work in the field so we can support you both, and we're agreed where the energy is being focused. That's not an attempt to smother you, but it's an attempt to stay accountable and stay in relationship and stay transparent together so that together we accomplish this with a strong partnership and a strong commitment to the outcome. Let's just summarize the action areas coming out of this first lesson. I believe there are 7 of them. Number 1, draft a personal statement of calling, starting with why and how would you articulate that calling with a donor, a committed team member, and a pre-Christian. And then drafting a personal growth plan, reviewing the trust-building behaviors, Stephen Covey, which ones do you need to work on, and be accountable with your coach. Drafting a vision frame and using the concepts from Will Mancini's Church Unique. Practicing that with 3 different people, a donor, a person on your team, and a pre-Christian. And by the way, let me just pause here and say, don't let that become an academic thing. I believe that there is a pre-Christian out there somewhere that would take an interest in what you're doing if you'll build the relationship. You're not asking them to make a commitment to your project, but you say, you know what, I'd buy you lunch every other month if I could bounce some things off you. And it would be a person that you could, again, just be totally transparent with. And if you pray and keep your eyes and ears open, you might be surprised at how even that can be a way for you to build a connection with someone and to test, and that's a word that we'll use a lot in this process. Testing your language, testing your communication, testing your vision frame and your vision statement, your personal statement of calling, beginning a timeline document with the post notes. We talked about that. And you might even begin to lay that timeline out and say, a few dates that I think we can agree on. I think we could say that by such and such a date, we want to be having this activity. And you can begin to put those post notes out, recognizing that you may end up moving them around a fair bit. And then naming your 4 key partners, identifying them, and finally connecting with your coach to review each of these action areas. And let me just pray for you, God, that as we work together on getting clear on the unique vision, that we hear from you and sense where your Holy Spirit is moving and what you've called us to do. Give us a sense of clarity around that. Give us partners that we might need, brand new partners for this work together. I pray especially for that coaching relationship, that it would be someone that could really help us begin to move forward in these areas of execution with effectiveness. Thanks for hearing our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Talk to you soon.